Hey guys, it's Rick. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be watercoloring a beautiful sunflower using distress inks as watercolors. Let's get into it right now. All right, so today we are going to be using the golden maple travel sable brushes that I used the other day, and I have stamped out the big and bold Ukraine sunflower stamp set from Colorado Craft Company onto some Canson XL watercolor paper. I have stamped that with using Fallen Leaf VersaFine Clair ink. And we're going to be using Distress ink re-inkers used as watercolors. And I'm going to show you how I like to do this. Plus, we're going to be talking some tips and tricks in watercoloring for your card making. So let's start off by our watercolor process. I'm going to use the number 4 round brush from that set, and I'm going in with my Distress re-inkers. Again, use those watercolors. And I like to start off by putting the color where I want it to be the darkest, and then pulling it out with a thirsty brush. We have talked about a thirsty brush previously in other videos, and that is simply where you take and dip your brush into the water, in your clean water, I should say, and you blot it off on a paper towel just to get most of the water out, and that is called a thirsty brush. Now, what you saw me just do there is I went back in with a second layer of color, and I'm pulling that out, letting the colors blend on the paper. I'm using antique linen, antique linen, wild honey, and carved pumpkin for the leaves of my sunflowers. I did stamp that in VersaFine Clair Fallen Leaf ink. If I didn't mention it before, I don't remember already. That's sad, y'all. I don't remember that. I don't know if I told you what ink I used. But we stamped that out. I'm going to go ahead and do all of the same color sunflower petals at one time. And I'll work my way around the card. And just following that same process, I'm not going to start off doing that. It didn't dawn on me, to use all the same color at one time. I don't know why, because I normally do that. But we're going to get to there in a second. It's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pull all those colors, start pulling that color out. And remember, I'm putting it where I want it to be the darkest, and I'm pulling it out lighter with that thirsty brush. And that allows me a nice gradation of color. And it's a simple way to watercolor your cards. If you struggle with watercolors, this is a perfect technique for that, because it allows you to get that same gradient wash that we all know and love in our watercolors with a lot of less effort. So as I continue on, I got one more petal, and then I'm going to start with the same color. It's okay. So as you can tell, we are making a super pretty card today using only those few supplies. And this is supplies that you probably might have on hand. Don't run out and buy something. You could actually do this with your Distress ink pads as well. Just smush them on your glass mat and watercolor that way. I've shown that in a video before also. I'll try to remember to link that. But all in all, I did find these brushes they're pretty good. As I said in the last video on Monday or Tuesday, I did look up the price. They were $21, and then when I looked them up later that afternoon, I guess they're having a Prime special, which is currently going on now. It's like $17 for the set of 7 brushes. I did link them in the supply list below, so you can find those. And remember, when you use my links, that is an affiliate link, and it does help me out by giving me a small commission at no cost to you, so that I can keep these videos going for free for y'all. So this is where I figured out, do the same color, Rick, at one time. So I'm going to work my way around the sunflower. I forgot what flower it is, and that's sad, because sunflowers are one of my favorite flowers. Love the color and love how big and bold they are. And so this stamp set was perfect for me. Anyway, so not much is going on with us. We'll have a little story time while we're sitting here talking. There's not much going on. We're just working around the house still. Charles did just get back from his eye doctor's appointment, his yearly checkup. Thank goodness nothing has changed. He hasn't had any problems. So we're going to be picking out glasses later today, which is a problem for me. Why, you might ask? It's because no matter what frames he picks out, and I love him dearly, y'all all know I do, but no matter what frames he picks out and he loves them at the time, he's going to hate them until he gets used to them in a couple weeks. So he complains about them afterwards for 2 or 3 weeks until he finally gets used to them. I dread glasses time. I really do, but is what it is. Love him. That's one of his little quirks. God bless him. All right, I've moved on to antique linen, and I'm just going around using antique linen, and I'm doing that same process where I'm pulling out, putting it where I want it to be the darkest, and pulling it out with that thirsty brush. And I'm going to continue working around, and I'm going to do the carved pumpkin the same way. I did cut out some of this for y'all so that y'all didn't have to sit through the repetitive process. All in all, this took me about an hour to paint from start to finish. I had already previously stamped out the image the night before. That way it had plenty of time to dry. And I am going in between each layer and drying it with my heat tool. So I did cut that out for y'all also, because God knows who wants to watch somebody dry paper with a heat tool. So we've cut that out, and you can see you can add a lot of color in those shadow areas with just a little bit of paint. There's hardly any paint on my brush. I just barely put the tip of that number 4 round brush into my pigment and pull it out, and I get a perfect blend every time. All right, so we are finishing up the sunflower. I'm going to go back on the antique linen because it is a super light color, and I'm going to add a second layer to all of those petals, and I'm only concentrating that layer where I want the shadows to be. So anywhere like an object overlaps the other object, or the fold of the petal is creased, I will go ahead and use that antique linen again and add a second layer to that. That way it just intensifies the color and builds it up a little bit more, so it makes it a lot easier. Okay, we are going to continue on with the layering process. There's not really hard, and you can really see it on that petal particularly how I do the same process. I just put it where I wanted it to be the darkest, and I pulled it out with that thirsty brush and just blended it in just a little bit. Super easy to do. Now, once we get this part of the process done, I did dry this before I moved on to the center area, which we will get to in just a second. So yeah, that's what's going on with us. Back to the card for a second. I'm adding the center layers of color, and I used frayed burlap, distress reinker, and scorched timber. I'm going in with the frayed burlap right now. This is a super pretty color. I didn't think I would like it to begin with, but it actually really is, and you can build up a lot of dark color with it. But I'm just putting that to where I want it to be the darkest and pulling it out into that area. And I did do a couple layers of that to begin with because it wasn't quite dark enough. I did switch to what brush did I switch to? It wasn't the biggest. It is the number 8 round for this in that golden maple set. And then I'm coming in with scorched timber right there in the center of the card, because most time your sunflowers has that really dark center. So that's what I'm doing. And I'm just letting those, if they blend in the middle because of the water, that's great. Now for the stem and the leaves, I'm using crushed olive to begin with. So I've blended that in, and then I'm going to add in a touch of pine needle, and you'll see that just shortly. I'm still using the number 8. I am going to eventually switch to the number 10 to give it a little workout too. I'm coming in with the leaves, and I'm using the crushed olive first. I put it down the center, and I pulled it out. And I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to add just a little bit more in that center to make it a little bit darker. Pull that color out to the edge, and then I will come in with the pine needle, and I'm going to darken up the center, letting the colors, while that paper is still damp, melt together and create a new color. I did add some little shadow areas right under where they would be, and I'm kind of along the edge. I'm adding some of that pine needle also, and then I will soften it out with that thirsty brush and let the colors blend together a little bit, just in the shadow areas. It just needed a little something. I needed that glow, but it needed a little bit of pop as well. So that's what I'm doing. For the next one, I'm going to add in the pine needle first, and then we'll talk about that. So I'm going to add in that pine. Go ahead and add in the pine needle first this time, because it's going to be a little bit darker because how it overlaps, and I wanted that darkness to show through. I'm going to soften that color and pull it out some with my thirsty brush, and then along the edge I'm going to come back in with the crushed olive, and then I will pull that into the center and let that blend together that way. That's also another way you can use for your watercoloring. So there's another tip for y'all. And then I'll just blend those together. All right, we're going to work on the outside in just a minute. I'm just making sure those colors are nice and smooth. I did dry this. Now I'm just coming in with that number 10 round brush and with some clean water. You don't want a lot of water. You don't want it to be like pooling up. You just want a nice little sheen on the paper. And I'm using some picked raspberry. I think this is picked raspberry. It might be seedless preserve. I don't remember. I think it's picked raspberry. Could be seedless reserve. Either one would work fine. So I am just going to pull that color out into that water. This is called wet into wet. We have been doing wet into dry, or dry into wet. I'm sorry. Technique. Now we are going to do the wet into wet. This is also that dry brush technique, or drying technique, where we go do it just straight to the paper and pull that color out with some of that damp brush. You can do it either way, wherever floats your boats, baby. Go ahead and do what you do, you boo boo. We are going to switch back to our wet into wet technique because it makes it a little bit easier. I guess I didn't. I could have swore I did, but apparently not. I think I do it up at the top because I want it to be a little bit softer, but that's neither here nor there. We'll get to that in a minute. All right, so we're just going to blend those edges together, and so yeah, that's what's going on with us. We were going to be ordering glasses later today after I do this voiceover. And what else is going on? We were going to go to this big yard sale that they have, 107 yard sale or something like that. If anybody knows what the heck that is, I don't know. But we decided not to, and we just kind of hung around the house on the weekend and just kind of did our thing. We do have haircuts on Saturday. We lead such a boring life, y'all. We have haircuts on Saturday, so we'll go see Tabitha and get our haircuts. And we are just going to continue on. See, I did tell you I went back to that wet to wet technique. So again, you're just going to add in a sheen of water on your paper. You don't want it bubbling. You just want a little bit, a nice little sheen on the paper. And then you're just going to get a little bit of color and pull it out. It's not as hard as what it looks like. It does take practice. I'm not going to lie to y'all. Watercolor takes practice. You cannot just start and be fabulous at it. You have to practice at it. It's something you need to practice at least weekly. And the more you practice, the better you're going to get. As I was saying, the more you practice, the better you're going to get. It took me years and years to get as good at watercolor as I am. And I'm not being boastful. I'm being super humble. I had a love-hate relationship with watercolors. I've told this story many times. I loved watercolor. I loved the look of it. I think it was super pretty. And I bought every book that you could possibly find on how to watercolor. Tried it for many years. Could not do it. Could not. It looked like crap. But finally, I just kept trying. I took a class in college on it. And that's, after all my studying and everything, that class in college is what made it click for me. And it finally just started working out. The more I practiced, the better I got at it. And then this is what you see today is how we come on to it. Now, I'm going to test out what color matte I want to do for this 5x7. Oh, and by the way, this is a 5x7 top folding card. So I'm going to show you how to make a top folding 5x7 card as well. So I've chose the wild berry cardstock, and I've cut those mattes down just an quarter inch shorter. You can find the measurements on the blog post. You find that linked in the description below. I'm figuring out my sentiment now, and we're going to use our cottontail powder brush and prep that scrap piece of that wild berry cardstock. And I'm going to stamp my sentiment, which says rise above the storm, and you will find the sunshine. At first, I was going to stamp it in gold pigment ink from Alta New, the antique gold. And I stamped it, And I decided I didn't like it, that it wasn't going to be right because I was going to emboss it in gold. So I switched over quickly to my unicorn white pigment ink. I thought white would be better. And I'm just going to cover that in the white, opaque white, bright white embossing powder from Wow. And then I'm going to heat set that until it's nice and smooth and melted. And then I have another trick for y'all. I am full of them today and full of it all the time, but today I'm full of the tricks. All right, so we're going to just heat set that until it's nice and melted. And then once it's cooled, I'm buffing it off with my microfiber towel. I'm going to take the stamp set, line it back up on the stamp sentiment the way it goes, if you were stamping it down. I'm taking that pencil and tracing around the stamp. We're going to create our own shadow layer. So I'm taking my micro mini recoil scissors from Tim Holtz and just tracing or cutting around that traced line. I'm cutting on the inside edge of it. That way I have no issues with any of that pencil showing. Anything that did, I just took an eraser after it was done and cut it off. Or erased it, cut it off. So around those small letters, I was going to leave it straight, but I decided to just go around them and just kind of anything that was pumping down, I just kind of cut around it, made it my own little shadow layer. And there we go. There's our nice little sentiment. I'm going to erase any little pencil marks that was left. And there's that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pop up my panel. I have cut it down a 1/2 inch on 2 of the sides, so it's like 4.5 by 6.5 or something like that. Yeah, 4.5 by 6.5. So I'm just adding my instant dimension of foam tape. I'm going to take and I've filled it up. I'm going to peel those backings off. And I did have to grab my scissors to cut it apart because it doesn't pull like the other, the 3M foam tape. I'm taking my glue press and I'm adding liquid glue to the back of that because y'all know my little trick about that, where we just add our liquid glue back there. And I am going to attach that to my Wildberry cardstock matte layer. And it is cut 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. And then I'm going to put my card base together. So I've cut down little pieces of foam tape and put behind my sentiment. And I'm going to add our liquid glue behind there. And we are going to pop this onto our card front. And I'm going to go ahead and we are going to work on our card base. Now, for this, you're going to need a piece of cardstock, heavy cardstock that's cut at 8 by 5. That's going to be our top. We've just scored that at 1 inch. And then you need another piece that is 5 by 7. You're going to increase that score line really good. And you are going to add liquid glue or score tape, whatever. I like the liquid glue because I can move it around a little bit better around that whole thing. I'm going to line up my 5 by 7 piece and just fold that the flap over to create my top folding 5 by 7 card. You do have to trim off just a little bit from that back panel because you could go ahead and trim it a little bit shorter to begin with. I'm lazy and I'll just do it afterwards. So I'm going to add our card front to our card base now. But that's how you make a top folding A7 card base, which is 5 by 7. Super simple to do. You just have to do a little bit more cutting and a little bit of scoring. So we are just going to add that to our card front, to our card base. I'm going to come in and add some white gel pen highlights with my Uniball Signo gel pen. So I'm just adding my highlights around through the watercolor painting. I did add some on the leaves. In the end, you really don't end up seeing these because I'm going to add some little glitter on this in a minute. I had to check my pen because it decided it wasn't going to work right. So I had to clean off that edge a little bit. And the Signo pens, they're hit and miss sometimes. But this pack I got really works, so I'm using those. And I do have my bold jelly roll also. I could have grabbed it, but they were in the house, so there's that. Now I'm going to take my gold Signo pen, and I'm just going to trace around the edge of the card front onto that wild berry cardstock. This is a simple way to add a splash of color, and it looks like a super thin mat of gold on your card that way it's super easy, and we're just going to connect those lines. And now I'm going to come in with a gold Wink Stella glitter brush pen, and I'm going to add a little gold glitter. This is the gold. You could use the clear if that's what you have. I actually have this one, a silver one, and another gold one that's super gold, and the clear and some other ones. Hadn't used them in a while, so I thought I'd pull them out and use them a little bit. So we're just coming around on our petals and adding just a little bit of that gold glitter. I thought the gold would be good for fall. And I am going to end up adding a little bit more of this because, a little's good and a lot's going to be even better. So I'm going to come over the entire center of my sunflower and add that in. It didn't reactivate the ink, so I was super happy about that. It does tint it a little bit, but that was okay. I'm going to add some to those leaves and a little bit to the stems, and I'm going to come in and add them to, I was going to do it to all of the petals, and I did do it to a few, but I ended up deciding at the end, right before I finished, that I should stick to the ones that were the antique linen because those were super light, and they could have really benefited from that gold glitter. So I'm going to start adding it just to those petals that are the antique linen ones. You can still see the antique linen through it. It just gave those a little bit more oomph and pop and drama to my card, which was why I decided to go ahead and just do those ones. I did add some to, as you saw before, to some of the as a highlight to some of those other ones. And now I'm going to come in with my matte white enamel dots from the Rabbit Hole Designs, and I'm going to actually tint those as well with that same Wink Stella glitter brush pen. Now, don't do what I did just here. Don't do it on the card. Do it on the plastic sheet they come on and let them dry. I should have done this first, but I'm impatient and I'm lazy and I didn't do that. But in order to not be, because I'm a cheap, so I did get a little ink on some of the other ones. I'm just going to by God color some of those other ones on there, cover up the little mess up, and we're going to call it good because that's how we roll here. We ain't wasting a card and starting this over again. That ain't going to happen. So I'm going to take my Pro Craft pickup tool from scrapbook.com, use that. I also have the Trinity one that I use all the time. Love it. So if you're looking for a good pickup tool, either one of those is great. The Pro pickup tool has more tools on it. They're about the same price. Everything's great. Here's a closer look at my card, and here's another look, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys. Stay crafty.